Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Kris. This is Eyewitness Accounts from the Napoleonic War, Spain and Portugal, 1808 to 1814. This is going to be a two-parter, but I might stop it there because it's about to be about 29 minutes where it gets into the sponsors. So we'll go about 14 minutes. Nope, we'll go here 14 minutes, and the second one will be 15 minutes. So sorry for breaking it up. I know some people don't like that. I break it up because if I do the whole video, I may only get 7 minutes of viewage time. If I break it up, I get maybe, well, I'm sorry, the full video is 11 minutes. If I break it up, it's 7. So I break them up. Before we get started, click that thumbs up for me. That helps out tremendously. You can subscribe to the channel. Sorry about that, just like I did. You can hit the thanks button on my channel. Donate. If you do, you request a video, your name's sponsoring that video. This was a requested video. They just won't get the special shout out because they didn't donate, but they just requested it through the comment section, and that's what you can do. All right, so we're going to break this down into two parts, 14 minutes for the first one, and let's go.
In 1808, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte launched a war against Spain, until then one of France's closest allies. But Napoleon saw a country that was backward, in thrall to its priests, and ruled by an incompetent, dissolute monarchy. He intended to sweep away these corrupt institutions and bestow upon Spain the benefits of Napoleonic rule: reform, modernization, efficient government. The Spanish people, pious and loyal, reacted with fury. The result was a savage war that lasted nearly 6 years, costing 500,000 lives and helping to bring down Napoleon's empire. For the Spanish, it was their war of independence. For their British allies, the Peninsular War. These are the voices of witnesses to those momentous days. In the spring of 1808, French troops, posing as Spain's allies, occupied many Spanish cities by stealth. But as it became clear Napoleon intended to depose the Spanish royal family, opposition mounted. In Madrid, on the 2nd of May, a tense situation between locals and French troops exploded into violence. The famous Dos de Mayo. A local priest witnessed the uprising.
Blind with the rage and fury, some fired on the French from windows and street corners. Others flung themselves on their very ranks. Still others hurled stones, pieces of furniture and pots and pans from the balconies, where they were joined by women armed with cauldrons of boiling water. It really seemed as if there was not a single person who did not want to water the streets with French blood, even at the cost of their own.
For all its fame, French losses in this revolt were only 31 dead and 114 wounded. But stern French reprisals saw around 300 Spanish prisoners shot, and set the tone for a war that was to be fought to the knife, with terrible cruelty on both sides. As Napoleon announced that his brother Joseph would be the new King of Spain, fighting spread across the country. At Zaragoza, Spanish soldiers and civilians joined forces to defend the city against the French.
About 1 o'clock, the French troops approached the city, whereupon we immediately opened fire on them. This was accompanied by a display of valor on the part of the inhabitants that has few equals. Seeing that the French were inside the walls, they rushed to confront them, with no other protection than their own noble breasts, and forced them to retreat in a hail of fire.
Captain Józef Mieroszynski was a Polish officer serving in Napoleon's army and took part in the assault.
A bloody fight began, and the defenders of Zaragoza for the first time saw their enemies checked. This cheered them, and whole mobs of them now began to rush towards the gate. Crowding into the houses that overlooked it, they opened fire from the windows and roofs on our men, who could not see them, to fire back. With a hail of fire crisscrossing our columns from all directions, General Lefebvre recognized the need to fall back from the walls of the city and gave the order to retreat.
The people were in great confusion, but this in no way interfered with the unmatched heroism they displayed. This was especially true of the women, who from the very beginning kept the defenders supplied with water, wine, and brandy, and mingling among their ranks, reanimated their spirits, and helped them to defeat an enemy who was as daring as he was ferocious. The destruction that we suffered was very great.
That summer, Napoleon's most stubborn enemy, Britain, sent forces to aid Spain and Portugal, which the French had also invaded. In July, around 14,000 British troops landed at Mondego Bay. Among them, Private Harris of the 95th Rifles, thrust into action at Rolisa just days after disembarking.
The Rifles indeed fought well this day, and we lost many men. Joseph Colquhoun was by my side, loading and firing very industriously. Thirsting with heat and action, he lifted his canteen to his mouth. "Here's to you, old boy," he said, as he took a pull at its contents. As he did so, a bullet went through the canteen, perforating his brain, killed him in a moment. Another man fell close to him almost immediately, struck by a ball in the thigh. Indeed, we caught it severely just here. I saw a man named Simmons struck full in the face by a round shot, and he came to the ground a headless trunk.
British and French regiments were accompanied by a number of women who provided services from laundry to nursing, and often married men in the regiment. They knew any battle might bring dreaded news.
When the roll was called after the battle, the females who missed their husbands came along the front of the line to inquire of the survivors whether they knew anything about them. Amongst other names, I heard that of Colquhoun called in a female voice, without being replied to. As I looked at the poor sobbing creature before me, I felt unable to tell her of his death.
For all the horrors of battle, it was the ferocity of Spanish and Portuguese partisans that alarmed French soldiers most. French convoys and messengers were particularly vulnerable to ambush by these guerrilla fighters, and never traveled without an escort. Captain Marbeau was one such messenger, sent out at night with urgent dispatches.
The officer commanding our advance guard gave me a troop horse and 2 orderlies, and I went on my way in brilliant moonlight. When we had gone 2 or 3 leagues, we heard several musket shots, and bullets whistled close past us. We could not see the marksmen, who were hidden among the rocks.
But the most terrifying fate was to be taken alive by the guerrillas.
A little further on, we found the corpses of 2 French soldiers, recently killed. They were entirely stripped, but their shakos were near them. Some little distance further, we saw a horrible sight. A young officer of the 10th, still wearing his uniform, was nailed by his hands and feet, head downwards, to a barn door. A small fire had been lit beneath him. Happily, his tortures had been ended by death. But as the blood was still flowing from his wounds, it was clear the murderers were not far off.
Such sickening discoveries led to savage French reprisals, fueling a cycle of atrocities by both sides.
A few grenadiers and a woman canteen keeper, having dropped behind, stopped in a village to pass the night. Next day, they were given a guide who led them into a prepared ambush. There, their throats were all cut, with refinements of cruelty. The commandant of the battalion, informed of this horrible ambush, marched on the village, had it burned to the ground, seized all the able-bodied men, and announced he would have them all put to death if they did not point out the murderers. 4 refused to confess and were shot. But the 5th revealed the assassins. They were present. They were shot.
All the elite companies were got together.
I mean, you have to understand the people are not going to line up and fight a military battle against the French because you can't win. So you're going to do terrible things fighting guerrilla style, because if you can make it to where you really disgust the French, then, I mean, obviously they're going to be mad at what you're doing, but maybe you'll disgust them enough that they're just going to leave. That's always a hope, but the counter to that is that they look at you like, well, you have to be killed now because of what you've done to my friend.
The aim was to drive off the brigands who, from time to time, raided our lines and cut us off from every supply of food. We found the brigands barricaded in a little town called Alcanes. After a sharp fight, we got into the place and it was given over to us for pillage. Having murdered everyone and looted everything in sight, we stayed on for another 6 weeks. The brigands attacked us several times, but they could achieve nothing. However, whenever they caught someone from our side, they subjected him to martyrdom.
Sorry about that. My pup had to go outside. All right, back to the video.
Their tongues and nails were torn out, and then they were roasted alive.
In 1809, one British naval officer watched from his ship as French troops sacked the Spanish town of Corcubion.
We observed the French soldiers pouring into the wretched town from both sides of the valley. Many of the inhabitants rushed to the fishing boats on the beach and, leaping into them indiscriminately, pushed into the stream. As we rowed up the harbour, we met hundreds of these poor people, half-dressed, screaming, and struggling hard to get beyond the reach of shot. Others fled along the sides of the hills towards the bay, hoping to be picked off the shore by boats or to conceal themselves amongst the rocks. Of these fugitives, great numbers were brought down by the fire of the enemy. So completely hemmed in were these wretched people that escape is almost impossible. The horror and confusion of this frightful spectacle were increased by the conflagration of the town, in the streets of which deeds of still greater atrocity were going on.
The war in Spain had begun disastrously for the French. They faced unexpected and ferocious resistance across the country. forcing Napoleon to intervene personally with massive reinforcements. The Spanish armies were defeated. Their British allies scrambled to escape, beginning a desperate winter retreat through the mountains towards the port city of Coruña.
It became everyone for himself. The load we carried was too great, and we staggered on, looking neither to the right nor the left. If a man dropped, he found it no easy matter to get up again, unless his companion assisted him, and many died of fatigue. As for myself, I was nearly floored by this march, and on reaching a town one night, which I think was called Zamora, I fell at the entrance of the first street we came to. The sight left my eyes, my brain reeled, and I came down like a dead man. The enemy, I should think, were at this time frequently close upon our trail, and I thought at times I heard their trumpets come down the wind as we marched. Towards the dusk of the evening of this day, I remember passing a man and woman lying clasped in each other's arms and dying in the snow. I knew them both, but it was impossible to help them.
Go back. But we're going to end it there. You know, that's the thing. When you're doing guerrilla warfare and you really do some terrible things to the enemy, and this being the French, you're also inviting them to do some terrible things back. And it's not like today where the press might get on you. You can't do that. International community might be, you know, everyone wants to fight a war without looking like savages. But that's what war is. So when you do, it's a tit for tat, an eye for an eye. When you do something, you have to expect something's going to, they're going to do terrible things back. It's war. This stupid dog. Hey, stop. Okay. We're going to end this here. It's part 1. We will be back for part 2. But until then, have a good day, have a good night.